Welcome back to the morning show here on the Rise News. I'm Adesua Omoruan.
And I'm Rufai Yoseni.
As the 9th National Assembly approaches, and with Ali Ndume, Senator representing Borno South, saying his quest to head the Senate still stands, despite the fact that Hamid Lawan, Senate leader, is the choice of President Muhammadu Buhari and the leadership of the All Progressives Congress. He, Ndume, will not withdraw from the race. Meanwhile, Senator Danjuma Goje withdrew his bid for the Senate presidency, throwing his weight behind Senate leader Hamid Lawan for the position. Well, joining us to discuss this ongoing intrigue and politicking and more is political analyst Achike Chude. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the morning show.
Thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure having you, sir.
Well, it's beginning to look like a two-horse race for the Senate leadership for the APC, because we do have a PDP candidate in that race as well, with Senator Goje supporting Hamid Lawan, who is the party's choice, and Ali Ndume saying he's not going to step down. Do you think that it is too early to say that the APC has once again found itself where it found itself in 2015?
Maybe to some extent, because, you know, they were talking about party supremacy and all of that, but they also have to understand the ideals and the tenets, the basic tenets of democracy. Democracy implies choice. It implies liberty and freedom, you know, to take a decision. So when you have a situation, you know, there is nowhere in the constitution of this country that the party or the president of the country or political bigwigs allowed to do the selection of officers into the National Assembly. It is exclusively the prerogative of members of the National Assembly exercising their freedom to choose those they think are fit to represent them. But I agree that we are in a political dispensation where there are political party interests, and that the president of the country should also show interest in what happens with the other levers of government, but recognizing the fact that these are independent, you know, arms of government, given the same constitutional powers as the executive has also received, you know. So I think it's part of the horse trading that goes into politics. But we must also not forget that from 1999 to death, that the crisis that we have always had in the National Assembly has been precipitated, you know, and exacerbated by the undue influence and attempt by the executive to influence the National Assembly, from Okadigbo to Evans Enwerem and all the other, you know, leaderships, Salisu Buhari and all of that. We've always had that situation. But the period where the National Assembly was able to successfully assert some level of independence, we had relative stability in the National Assembly. You have the issue of Saraki, for instance. It was a rebellion by members of the APC and the PDP, you know, that they wanted to pick their own leadership. And you can see how that assembly, you know, performed. Same thing with the man before Saraki, the man from Benue State. Yes, David Mark and all of that. So, we don't know how, you know, they are going to try, but in terms of this. But it is obvious that the APC continues to prove that it is a house that is divided. And that's why you're having all these issues.
Okay, let me take you on something quickly. You said something that I want to interrogate even further. You said picking principal actors, you know, in the National Assembly is a purview of the members of the National Assembly itself, and party doesn't come to play. But I'll give you an instance. The so-called American democracy we copy. So what happened to Nancy Pelosi recently? Most of the new members that came into the circuit didn't like Nancy Pelosi, but the party said Nancy Pelosi was the way to go. And that was also the allusion that Dr. Shomoli did give when he was making a case that, you know, it's like that everywhere in the world. We have a right.
It's not like that everywhere. Even the Nancy Pelosi issue you talked about, the party should have gone to the National Assembly and voted for Nancy Pelosi. Ultimately, it was left for the members of the Congress to make that decision.
Before they go to National
what
Assembly.
they do, look, the reality was that the frontliner for that position, the most favored candidate for that position was Nancy Pelosi. All the other people were upstarts, and some of them were new people, you know, willing to make a change. but they were, called to order by the more experienced members of the Congress. And that's why you have ranking members. These are people who have been there, who have proved their mettle, and so people who are respected. You don't get to the, National Assembly, for instance, and want to, upstage people who have been there. There's a natural ranking order. So what the party did, and again, it was not about giving them a marching order. That is a different thing. They must have reasoned with them. This is the person that we feel confident with. This is the person that we feel stands the best chance, to look the president eyeball to eyeball and challenge the president on certain issues. You don't need an upstart to be able, or a political novice, or a newcomer to the Congress to be able to do that. So I think it was on the basis of all of these things, not sheer intimidation, not warning, matured people who have also excelled in other spheres of life, I want to believe, to toe the line because the party has said so. There must be that respect, and that's so this is the issue, because ultimately, at the end of the day, the party can do all the talking. But when they get to the National Assembly, those people, especially if it's going to be by secret voting, those people who are not convinced that Lawan should be the Senate president might decide to move against Lawan, and there's nothing the party.
But Danjuma Koje is convinced now that Lawan should be the Senate president.
Danjuma Koje is I mean,
and he has his own faction of followers too.
No. I mean, it's part of the negotiation now. I mean, there are so many things there. For instance, all in wanting to throw his support behind Lawan, there could be, a discussion about certain privileged positions or positions within the National Assembly that should naturally maybe devolve to him when they are picking, leadership. I mean, people to head certain committees and all of that. So it's, there is a give and take situation that happens under this kind of circumstance.
But talking about the party's influence, you talk about imposition. I think you use the word imposing or forceful. There's a point, an argument made by the party to say, these representatives, these lawmakers campaigned on the platform of the party, won elections on the platform of the party, and all of a sudden, they remember that they are individual voices and they can take their own decisions, and it doesn't work that way. You cannot use the party and dump the party.
Oh, great.
That is the argument made by the party.
Great. But I remember that there are some people that contested under the opposing political parties who took the mandate given to them by the people in those political parties and went into the APC, and the APC welcomed them with open arms. Now, that argument did not make sense and was not valid as at the time they were moving to the APC. It is the same argument, whether you're moving from the APC to the PDP or you're moving from the PDP to the APC. There's a mandate that has been given to you by the people. So what authority do you have to surrender that mandate on the basis of, of a personal interest, which is what has been going on? So that argument, cannot be valid, and it's not valid when you look at all the other surrounding issues. So it is easy to make all of these statements, and this is what they do. When it suits them, when a particular situation suits them, they embrace it. When the same thing happens and does not suit them, they condemn it and all of that. So it's exactly the scenario here.
Let's talk about the Orji Uzor factor in all of this.
Okay.
Orji Uzor yesterday was speaking about the fact that it is the time for the Southeast to get representation. He said that's why he's vying to be Deputy Senate President. He also said further that if the Southeast is given the speakership, and he said this, and I quote, he said, "We have all endorsed Gbajabiamila, but if the Southeast is given speakership of the House of Representatives, I will stop my ambition from being Deputy Senate President."
I don't think Orji Kalu is speaking for the Southeast. Orji Kalu is speaking for himself.
How so?
And you have to also understand that, all these things are elitist. These things are about, federing personal nests. That's what this whole thing, political ambition of most of these politicians are all about. You have to understand the nature and character of the average Nigerian politician. He is interested in himself and not in his people. For instance, you talk about what is going on in parts of the country, and I will give you instances, whether it is the Northwest, it is the Northeast, it is Southwest, it is the Southeast. People talk about maybe the northern part of this country being very, when it comes to politics, they they have this dexterity, they have this ability, they have this,
vitality of some sort.
vitality and what it takes, to maintain political power in this country. But the question I will ask you today, with what is going on in the north of this country, how has that helped the ordinary northerner, the ordinary person on the street in the north? It has been the elites that have benefited from the political power that we have, that they have exercised. Same thing with the southwest. How many people, you're talking about hospitals, you're talking about education, you're talking about this. How has it rubbed off, you understand, on the people of the southwest? Same thing with the southeast, every part of this country. You understand? So ultimately, the elites have a way, and they call it elite bargaining. They have a way of bargaining, some of these things. But in most cases, it is always to their own personal interest and the interest of their, families, about self-aggrandizement. So Achike Chude, for instance, cannot tell me, he cannot, on this matter, he can pretend that he speaks for the Southeast and all of that, but I do not think that that is what it's all about. Look, ultimately, at the end of the day, political positions is not about this. They exercise these political positions on behalf of themselves, and the benefits that accrue to themselves, not to the people from their region.
Let me just
let us look at it the way it should be
Let me
looked
just
at.
take you up on this, and since we've segued into this, the House of Representatives, early 2000, a certain young man was vying for the speakership of the House of Representatives. He had made a claim that he schooled in Toronto, Canada. His name's Salisu Buhari. We saw how that case went. And it was said that, he didn't go to Toronto, Canada to school. And we saw that the young man then will have nicked it and become arguably the youngest speaker, one of the youngest speakers of the House. But we saw how that case went.
But yeah, he was actually speaker until I think he was forced out.
Until he was forced out. But see this Femi Gbajabiamila case.
Yeah.
Any similarities between Salisu Buhari?
You mean the ongoing controversy about with the U.S. Supreme Court judgment and all of that? As they say, it's by their fruits that you shall know them. And so when a government makes a claim or a person makes a claim about himself and endows himself with certain abilities, people will watch to see how well he's able to live by the words that come from his mouth and by the proclamations they make about these abilities.
You will continue on that because we need to go on a quick short break, and we'll be right back on the morning show. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Rise News. We still have with us Achike Chude. We're talking about the National Assembly, the 9th National Assembly, but let's take a look at the 8th National Assembly that has just,
And he was trying to answer a question about Femi Gbajabiamila.
Yeah, I mean, the surrounding
controversy
swelling around Femi Gbajabiamila, I think it's a very serious
and the similarities to Salisu Buhari.
Oh, yes, it's a very, very serious issue. I mean, you're talking about the possible number 4 person in this country being called or indicted for criminal activity in the United States.
They have denied it.
In the United States and so on. I mean, these things are verifiable. It's not about denying. These things can be. And I think the government has a duty, especially with a president who says that his government is anti-corruption, a government who is seen or is being described as somebody with integrity and all of that. People are disputing about. I mean, that is what it surrounds the president. People look at him from that perspective and all of that. So you don't want to get involved in this kind of process that can end up embarrassing you and embarrassing your administration. And so they have a duty to find out, to get to the bottom of this. Has Femi Gbajabiamila been involved in one kind of fraud or
But they said that was Femi Gbaja. That was Femi Gbaja. So there's a difference between Gbajabiamila and Gbaja.
No, we've had issues. I don't know whether they caught any eyes with anybody because we had the Evan Enwerem and the Evans Enwerem, scenario. Ultimately, it was the same person. We had the James Ibori and the James Onanefe Ibori situation. Obviously, the same kind of, because there are also fingerprint evidence of the people that were involved in it. So if it's Gbaja, Femi Gbaja, as against Femi Gbajabiamila, they are trying to say that it's a completely different person. Now, when you have these issues in the United States, they have fingerprint, technology that would identify whether it's the same person. There are also pictures, you know, of the processes and the proceedings and all of that. And so it is something that is provable, because if they are saying that it's Gbaja, and that's the implication for you, I mean, you are hinting that they had said that they had denied it, but they are affirming that there's an incident involving Femi Gbaja. So in a way, they have affirmed that such an incident took place, but they are saying it happened to Femi Gbaja, not Femi Gbaja Biamela. All of these things are verifiable. He lived in the United States. He stayed in that city. And then, you know, so it is easy to prove whether he's the one or not. But if it is proven that he's the one, then I can tell that he has no business mounting the position of a speaker of the National Assembly.
So let's talk about away from individuality now, let's talk about the National Assembly. The valedictory service speech yesterday by Honorable Dogara. He says that the 8th House of Representatives has been the most harassed.
I don't know whether it's been the most harassed, but I know that Nigerians have had issues with their national assemblies. There is no doubt about that. I think they have all, from 1999 to today, they have expected so much. You know, they have not exactly gotten what, you know, I mean, fulfilled their expectations. In terms of their conduct. They have been immersed in all kinds of crises, all kinds of scandals. Fine. It's endemic of the situation we find ourselves in this country, because there's no executive from 1999 till date that has also not found itself immersed in one kind of scandal or controversy. Where I would differ from what has been going on is that somehow, maybe because they have the power of propaganda and the money and all of that, the executive, you know, in trying to find excuses for their failures, have always tended to make the National Assembly scapegoats for their failures and their own incompetence and all of that. Yes, we have problems with National Assembly from 1999 to date, but so also have we had issues, very serious issues with the executive. I do not want, now for instance, people are talking about, you know, a Lawan, you know, Senate presidency, or what's the other man's name now?
Alain Dume?
Dume's, you know, Dume Senate presidency and all of that. No problem with that. But the reality is that we do not want a pliant and compliant, you know, National Assembly. It is dangerous for this country, because with the kind of socio-political economic contradictions that we have in this country, we need some level of independence. We need some level of assertiveness by the National Assembly to look the executive in the eyes and say, look, we will not accept this, we will not do this. And all, regardless of the tar that they try to put, you know, on the National Assembly.
Why the Speaker, Honorable Dogara, says it's the most persecuted and harassed? In the Red Chamber, Senator Bukola Saraki says, we fought for democracy, we held the government to account. How much of an effect did this frosty relationship have on governance, and did it benefit the people at all? Because the lawmakers will tell you that, and Honorable Dogara did say, you know, there's no legislative arm that, you know, does the billing of the executive anywhere in the world. So in their own minds, you know, it should not be a yes sir, yes ma House of Representatives or National Assembly.
If you're talking about the legislature, I think it's only at the national level that we had some level of opposition, some level of independence and assertiveness. Most of the houses, I mean, the State House of Assembly are useless. I will use that word advisedly. You know,
don't you think that's too harsh?
Yeah, that's why I said I will use that. Okay. You know, okay. Let me even reverse it. Yes, exactly. Yeah, let me just reverse. Maybe they have not been completely useless, but that they have been seriously compliant. They have been seriously submissive to the whims and caprices of the executive in virtually all the states of this country. And if you remember what happened, at the initial stage in 1999, they tried to assert they had some level of independence. They did, in fairness to them. But by the time the executive, you know, unleashed their full fury on the various state houses of assembly, engineered the removal of speakers and principal officers of State House of Assembly, in collusion sometimes with the security agencies, the police and the rest, invaded the State Houses of Assembly, you know, it became very clear to them that they were an endangered, you know, institution of government to some extent.
Let me take you up on this, Achike. The State House of Assembly, too, can be exonerated from the fault. They've been infighting an implosion
they cannot. No, they cannot.
And take, for instance, take the case of them Chidi Lloyd in the Rivers State House of Assembly.
Yes.
Take the case of the Free-for-all. Take the case of collusion. Only recently was when Serap and other agencies cried against it that, you know, Governor Sirakedis had to revoke the life pension for State House of Assembly members in Bayelsa State.
Yes. Yeah, you know, I think somewhere along the line, they discovered that discretion perhaps is the better part of valor. You know, and so they felt that, you know, it is better to side with the arm that is in a position to make and unmake, you know, what happens at the State House of Assembly. So they went into collusion with the state ESCOs in most of these states that you're talking about. So they are also complicit. It doesn't excuse them. I only said that at the initial stage, some of them, you know, tried to assert some level of independence. And when they tried and realized the full fury that the executive could bear on them, they decided to be compliant and began to collude with the state ESCOs. And that is why we now saw what you just described about, I mean, the issue of the pension for governors and all of that in Bayelsa State. It has happened in Lagos State. It happened in Akwa Ibom State. It has happened in very many states of this country, the state houses of assembly. So for as long as they agreed to leave the governor alone, allow the governor and his executive to do whatever they want, the governor also, it's a marriage, a relationship of convenience. That is what happens. But none of them, you know, can be exonerated from some of the contradictions that they have found themselves enmeshed in.
But hasn't the National Assembly stood firm in the face
I
of
think
all
the
this
National Assembly, I also say the same thing. They also have their demons. They also have their problems. And we know the National Assembly has been involved in all kinds of scandals. The Nigerian Stock Exchange, you know, scandal with Ohembe, and then the woman who was in charge then at that particular point in time, the people at the time, the hunters became the hunted. You know, the electricity probe that took place at the time, when some of them became compromised, the probe in the oil sector, the subsidy and the rest, we also had some, you know, compromising situation involving the Farouk Lawan situation and all of that. So they have not exactly been above board, if you put it that way.
But they were highs and lows. Yeah,
they were highs and lows. And of course, you know, again, if you want to look at this, you know, assembly, we might, like I said, we might not exactly be enamored by what they have done, what they achieved and all of that. But I think I saw, if there's anything I would say in their favor, it is the fact that they try to assert some level of independence, you know, again, by reaching arms of the executive. And I think to some extent they did well. There are some things that they could have done much better, no doubt about that. But again, the executive and the people spent all of the 4 years also trying to demonize them.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank you. What I took away from all of this is discretion is an important part of valor.
Thank you very much for coming on the morning show.